I'm 89 years old. I've lived through wars. I've buried friends. I've held my children the day they were born, and held my wife's hand the day she left this world. I thought I understood pain, but nothing prepared me for the silence of a nursing home room. You don't realize what you're losing when you sign those papers. It feels practical, responsible, safe. Your children tell you it's for the best. Doctors nod. Society calls it care. But no one talks about what it costs you. Your home, the walls that heard your laughter. Your chair, the one molded to your body after decades of evenings. Your neighbors who knew your name without checking a file. At 89, I didn't just move into a building. I moved out of my life. And today, I'm going to tell you the truth no brochure will ever say out loud. This video is about why I regret moving to a nursing home. Not because all nursing homes are bad. Not because care isn't important, but because there are emotional realities no one prepares you for. If you have elderly parents, if you are aging yourself, or if you think this decision is simple, you need to hear this. Listen carefully. And before we begin, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because these are the conversations families avoid until it's too late. Now let me tell you what really happens when you leave your home at 89. 1. You lose more than a house. You lose identity. A house is never just bricks, cement, and a roof. It is the silent witness to your entire existence. When you are young, you think you own a home. But when you reach 89, you realize the home owns your memories. It carries your fingerprints in places you forgot touching. It holds your laughter in the corners of the ceiling. It remembers arguments, celebrations, tears, birthdays, and quiet Sunday mornings. A house becomes an extension of your soul. In my old home, the dining table had scratches from when my children did their homework with too much pressure on their pencils. There was a burn mark near the edge from the time my wife accidentally placed a hot pan without a mat. Anyone else would see damage. I saw history. That table wasn't furniture, it was proof that life happened there. The hallway walls still had faint pencil lines marking my children's height year after year. Even after they grew up and moved away, those lines remained. They were evidence that I had raised human beings under that roof, that I mattered, that I had built something lasting. When you move into a nursing home, you don't just pack clothes. You pack pieces of your identity into cardboard boxes. And the cruelest part? Most of it doesn't fit. You are told you can bring a few personal items, a few framed photos, maybe a favorite chair if there's space. But how do you choose which memory deserves to survive in a single room? How do you compress 60 years of living into 4 walls that already belonged to someone else before you arrived? Your world shrinks overnight. From a house where every room had meaning, to one bed, one cupboard, one window. In your own home, you were the decision maker. You decided where things went. You fixed what was broken. You welcomed guests. You paid the bills. You were the anchor of that space. But in the nursing home, you are assigned a room number. Your name is printed on a small label outside the door. You go from being dad, grandfather, the man who built this family, to being room 214. And that change is not just practical, it is psychological. At home, when you walked into the kitchen, you knew exactly where the cups were without looking. Your body moved naturally in that space because it was shaped around you. In the nursing home, you hesitate. You ask permission. You adjust. You feel like a guest in your own remaining years. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the place that once reflected your personality has been replaced by neutral walls and identical furniture, the same as every other room down the corridor. There is nothing uniquely yours about it except the aging body lying in the bed. That does something to a person. It quietly whispers, you are no longer the center of your own life. Even small things become symbolic. At home, if you wanted to sit on the porch at midnight because you couldn't sleep, you could. That porch had held your deepest thoughts. In the nursing home, doors are locked after certain hours. Freedom becomes scheduled. Spontaneity disappears. You stop being the man who hosted family dinners. You become the man who waits for meal trays. You stop being the protector of your household. You become someone being supervised. And with each passing day, a subtle erosion happens. not of your body that was already aging, but of your identity. Because identity is tied to environment more than we realize. The smell of your kitchen, the sound of your gate opening, the creak of your bedroom floor. These were not random details, they were anchors. They reminded you who you were. Without them, you begin to feel unanchored. And when a person at 89 loses their sense of identity, it is not dramatic, it is not loud, it is slow, quiet, invisible, but it is devastating. You don't just lose a house, you lose the physical proof that your life was built by your own hands. And that loss doesn't just hurt, you feel it in your bones. 2. Independence disappears faster than you expect. Independence doesn't leave you all at once. It doesn't slam the door behind it. It slips away quietly, disguised as care, wrapped in routine, justified as safety. And by the time you realize it's gone, you're already living without it. At 89, your body may be slower, your steps more careful, your hands slightly unsteady, but your will, your desire to choose, to decide, to control at least the small corners of your life that remain strong. In fact, it becomes stronger because when everything else begins to weaken, independence is the last proof that you still exist as your own person. At home, I woke up when my body decided to wake up. Sometimes it was 5 a.m., when the world was still quiet and the air felt honest. I would sit near the window with a cup of tea, watching the sunrise paint the sky. No one told me it was too early. No one told me to go back to bed. Those quiet mornings weren't just routine, they were freedom. If I wanted eggs for breakfast, I made eggs. If I wanted nothing but biscuits and tea, that was my choice. If I felt like sitting outside in the sun for an hour, listening to birds and remembering my younger days, I did it. Those decisions may sound small to a young person, but when you are 89, those small choices are everything. They remind you that you are still in charge of your life. Then you move into a nursing home, and suddenly, your day is no longer yours. Breakfast is at 8, not when you're hungry when the schedule says so. Lunch at 12:30, dinner at 6. If you're not hungry, it doesn't matter. If you are starving at 10 p.m., you wait. The kitchen is closed. Lights dim at a fixed hour. Staff gently remind you it's bedtime. Even if you're not tired, even if you want to stay awake and watch an old movie that reminds you of your youth, even if sleep doesn't come easily anymore. Medication is brought to you in small cups. Time for this, time for that. You swallow pills on command. Necessary, yes, but symbolic. Another reminder that your body is no longer your own responsibility. It belongs to a system, and the system runs on efficiency, not individuality. You start asking for permission without realizing it. Can I go outside now? Is it okay if I keep the light on? May I have some tea? At home, you never asked those questions. You simply lived. There is something deeply unsettling about losing the right to make ordinary decisions. It chips away at your confidence. It makes you hesitate. You begin to doubt your own ability to choose. Imagine being a man who once built a career, raised children, paid bills, solved crises, and now being told when to shower. Even if the staff are kind, even if they smile, even if they truly care, dependence feels heavy. It settles in your chest. And over time, something dangerous happens. You stop trying. You stop asking for small freedoms because it feels easier to follow the routine. You stop insisting on your preferences because you don't want to be difficult. You begin adjusting your personality to fit the schedule. And when that happens, you start fading. Not physically, but internally. Because independence is not about big achievements at 89. It's about choosing your sweater for the day. It's about deciding to sit in the sun 5 minutes longer. It's about saying, no, I don't want that, without feeling guilty. When those choices disappear, you feel smaller, quieter, less solid. You begin to exist inside the structure instead of shaping your own day. And the most painful part, you know the routine is meant to help you. You understand it's organized for safety. You even feel grateful at times. But gratitude does not replace freedom. At 89, independence is the final thread connecting you to the strong, capable person you once were. And when that thread thins, when every hour of your day belongs to a timetable, you don't just lose control, you lose the feeling of being fully alive. And that loss is not dramatic. It is silent. But you feel it in your bones. 3. Loneliness doesn't end. It changes shape. People say, "At least you won't be alone there." They say it with relief in their voices, as if loneliness is something that can be solved by placing bodies in the same building, as if proximity equals connection. But loneliness is not about how many people are around you. It's about how many truly see you. In a nursing home, there are always sounds, footsteps in the hallway, the hum of a television playing too loudly in the common room, the soft squeak of wheelchairs rolling across polished floors. On paper, it looks like community. There are activities, group meals, scheduled games, shared spaces. But something feels different. The conversations often circle the same memories. Someone asks the same question 5 times within 10 minutes. Someone else stares out the window, lost in a world only they can see. You nod, you smile, you repeat your answers patiently. But deep inside, you realize you are not building new memories together. You are witnessing each other slowly. Let go of the old ones. At 89, you've already said goodbye to many friends. You've attended more funerals than weddings. You've learned that life becomes quieter with each passing year. But in a nursing home, that reality becomes concentrated. You meet someone at breakfast, a gentleman who fought in the same era as you. You talk about childhood streets, about how milk used to be delivered in glass bottles. You laugh at how different the world feels now. For a moment, you feel less alone. Then one morning, his chair is empty. No announcement, no explanation, just an empty chair. You don't ask what happened, because at 89, you already know. That's the kind of loneliness no one prepares you for. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scream. It sits quietly beside you, like a shadow that never leaves. Family visits at first. They promise they'll come every Sunday, and they try, they really do. But life moves fast for them. Work deadlines, school events, traffic, responsibilities. You understand. You always understand. But understanding doesn't make the waiting easier. You sit by the window on visiting day, watching cars pull into the parking lot. Every time a door closes outside, your heart lifts slightly. Maybe that one is for you. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. And on the days when it isn't, you tell yourself, maybe next week. You don't cry. Not at 89. You've learned to swallow disappointment quietly, but you feel it deep in your chest. A heavy, invisible ache. Loneliness in a nursing home isn't about being physically alone. It's about being emotionally untethered. At home, even if no one visited for a few days, you were surrounded by your life, your chair, your garden, your neighbor who waved from across the street, the familiar shopkeeper who knew your name. Those small interactions reminded you that you belonged somewhere. In the nursing home, belonging feels conditional. You are part of a system, a room number, a medical file, a schedule slot. People are kind. Staff members smile. They do their jobs with compassion, but they go home at the end of their shift. They have their own families, their own lives waiting outside those walls. You remain, and as evening falls, the hallways grow quieter. Televisions flicker behind half-closed doors. The air feels heavier. Night magnifies everything. The absence, the distance, the memories. You start talking to yourself more, replaying old conversations in your mind, hearing your spouse's voice as if they were still sitting beside you. Sometimes you even whisper answers out loud, because silence becomes too loud to bear. Loneliness at 89 is not about wanting crowds. It's about wanting one person who truly remembers you the way you were. The strong version, the capable version, the younger version. In a nursing home, most people only know the fragile version of you, the one who walks slowly, the one who needs assistance. They never saw you carry your child on your shoulders. They never saw you work late nights to provide. They never saw your prime. And when no one around you remembers who you were, you begin to feel like that version never existed at all. That is the deepest loneliness of all. It's sitting in a room filled with people and feeling like your entire life story is echoing in an empty hall. It's watching the door and knowing deep down, no one is coming today. And the quiet realization that this waiting might be the final chapter. 4. Visits become shorter over time. In the beginning, they come often. The first few weeks after you move in, the room still smells unfamiliar. The sheets feel different. The silence feels heavier than it should. But then the door opens, and there they are, your son, your daughter, maybe your grandchildren, rushing in with energy that fills the room. They adjust your pillow. They bring homemade food. They say, "How are you settling in?" They promise, "We'll come again this Sunday." And they mean it. At first, visits are frequent. Every week, sometimes twice. The room feels warmer when they are there. You sit straighter. You speak louder. You feel alive again. You tell stories. You laugh. You pretend you're adjusting better than you are because you don't want them to worry. When they leave, you replay every word they said. You hold on to the echo of their laughter like it's oxygen. But slowly, life outside continues moving. Work demands increase. Children have exams. There's traffic. There are unexpected events. A cold, a deadline, a school function. The visits begin to stretch out. Weekly becomes bi-weekly. Bi-weekly becomes monthly. Monthly becomes, "We'll try next weekend." You understand. Of course you understand. You spent your whole life sacrificing for them. You know how busy life can be. You don't want to be an extra responsibility on their already full plate. So when they call and say, "Sorry, Dad, we couldn't make it today," you respond with warmth in your voice. "It's okay. I know you're busy." And you mean it. But after the call ends, you look at the door anyway. You start counting days in a way you never did before. At 89, time feels different. A week is not just 7 days, it is a significant portion of what remains. Every postponed visit feels heavier than it would have years ago. You begin preparing for visits days in advance. You choose your sweater carefully. You ask the staff to help you shave properly. You sit near the window at the usual hour they arrive. You memorize the sound of the elevator. Every footstep in the hallway makes your heart lift slightly. Sometimes it's them. Sometimes it's someone else's family. You watch other doors open. Other rooms fill with laughter. You hear grandchildren's voices down the corridor. And for a moment, you smile happy that someone is being remembered today. But when your door stays closed, something quiet settles in your chest. You never accuse. You never complain. You never say, "Why don't you come more often?" Because love at 89 looks like silence. But silence doesn't erase the ache. Visits also grow shorter over time. At first, they stay for hours. They sit, they talk, they hold your hand. But gradually, they glance at their watches more often. "We have to go soon. There's something we need to attend." You nod. You say, "Don't worry, I'll be fine." And when they stand up to leave, you try not to look too eager for them to stay. You don't want to make them feel guilty. But after the door closes, the room feels twice as empty. The air changes, the warmth disappears, the silence returns louder than before. You sit there for a while, staring at the chair they were sitting in just minutes ago. Sometimes you touch the armrest as if it still carries their presence. You don't feel unloved. That's the painful part. You know they love you. You raised them. You know their hearts. But love and presence are not the same thing. What hurts is not the absence of love, it's the absence of time. You begin to feel like a memory in their busy lives instead of a living person. Important? Yes. Respected? Yes. But not central anymore. And when birthdays are celebrated with a quick visit instead of a full day, when holidays are squeezed between other obligations, when conversations become shorter, more practical, you feel something subtle but powerful. You feel forgotten, not erased, not abandoned, just slowly placed at the edge of their world. And at 89, being at the edge feels dangerous because you know time is limited. You know there aren't endless next weekends. You know that one day there won't be another chance to sit together. So you count the days, you memorize the calendar, you wait for the door to open. And when it doesn't, you tell yourself you understand. But deep inside, in a place you rarely admit even to yourself, you feel it. A quiet, heavy realization. that the world you once carried on your shoulders is moving forward without you. And that kind of forgetting doesn't shout, it whispers, but you feel it in your bones. 5. You start feeling like a burden, even if no one says it. No one ever looks you in the eye and says, "You're a burden." They would never be that cruel. In fact, they are gentle, careful, loving. They use soft words and reassuring tones. They tell you, "This is for the best." They hold your hand while signing the papers. They say, "We just want you to be safe." And that word safe sounds beautiful on the surface. But at 89, it begins to feel like something else. Because before you needed to be safe, you were strong. You were the one keeping others safe. You were the provider, the protector, the decision maker, the problem solver, the one who stayed awake when your child had a fever, the one who worked overtime without complaining, the one who carried responsibilities without ever calling them burdens. And now, suddenly, the roles have reversed. You notice the shift not in words but in expressions. The first time your son talks about care options, he looks tired, not frustrated, just tired. You hear it in the pauses between his sentences, the subtle stress in his voice, the way he says, "It's just getting harder to manage everything." He doesn't mean you, but you hear it anyway. You start noticing small things, the way your daughter rushes after helping you shower because she's late for work, the way your grandchildren look slightly uncomfortable when they see your medication lined up on the table, the way family conversations sometimes revolve around who's available to stay with you. You begin to feel like a responsibility that must be scheduled. And when the decision is finally made, when professionals step in, you see something that cuts deeper than any insult. Relief. It's subtle. It's human. It's understandable. But it's there. A quiet exhale. Now we can relax, knowing you're safe. Safe? That word echoes in your mind long after they leave the room. Safe from falling. Safe from being alone. Safe from medical emergencies. But what about being needed? What about being wanted? Safety, without belonging, feels different. It feels like being carefully stored away, like something valuable but fragile, placed somewhere secure, so it won't cause worry anymore. You know they love you. You know they don't want you hurt. But somewhere deep inside, a question begins to grow. Was I becoming too much? You replay moments in your head. The time you asked for help getting up. The time you forgot something important. The time you needed someone to repeat themselves because you didn't hear clearly. You start apologizing more often. Sorry for troubling you. Sorry you have to do this. Sorry I'm slowing you down. At 89, apologies become your reflex. And the worst part is no one told you to apologize. You just feel it. You start minimizing your needs, drinking less water so you won't need help as often, avoiding asking for things because you don't want to bother anyone, smiling through discomfort because you don't want to add stress to their lives. Imagine that. A person who once carried a family on his back, now trying to shrink himself to fit into other people's schedules. That's what feeling like a burden does. It makes you smaller. You sit in your nursing home room and remember the years when your home was loud and chaotic, when your children depended on you for everything, when you were the foundation. And now, you feel like excess weight being carefully redistributed. No one says it, but you sense it. When conversations become logistical instead of emotional. When visits focus on updates about your health rather than stories about your life. When decisions are made for you rather than with you. You feel the shift. And the most painful part? You don't blame them. You understand how exhausting caregiving can be. You understand modern life is demanding. You understand they are trying their best. But understanding does not erase the sting. Because deep down, what every 8-9-year-old truly wants is not just safety. It's significance. It's to feel like their presence still adds something to the family, not subtracts from it. Safety keeps you alive. Belonging makes you feel human. And when safety replaces belonging, when you are cared for but no longer central, when you are protected but no longer essential, you begin to feel like luggage placed carefully in storage, handled gently, checked on occasionally, but no longer carried with pride. And that realization doesn't break you loudly. It settles quietly in your chest. Heavy, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. You don't hear the words, "You're a burden," but sometimes you feel them in your bones. 6. Memories fade faster away from home. Something happens when you leave the place where your life unfolded. It's subtle at first, almost invisible, but it is real. Memories begin to loosen their grip. At home, you didn't have to try to remember. The memories lived in the walls. They were triggered by ordinary things: the smell of spices from the kitchen, the creak of the bedroom door, the sunlight hitting the same corner of the living room every afternoon. Your mind didn't have to search for the past. The past was woven into your surroundings. When I walked into my kitchen, I could almost see my wife standing by the stove. Even after she was gone, her presence lingered there. The way she used to hum while cooking, the way she would wipe her hands on her apron and smile when I entered the room. That kitchen wasn't just a place to prepare food, it was a doorway to decades of shared life. The garden was the same. Every plant carried a story. The mango tree we planted when our first child was born. The corner where we placed a small bench and talked about our worries late at night. Even the cracked flower pot near the gate reminded me of the time my grandson kicked his ball too hard and broke it, and we laughed instead of scolded him. The street outside held memories too. The neighbor who waved every morning. The shopkeeper who had known me for 30 years. The rhythm of that neighborhood reminded me who I was, not just an old man, but a man with history, with relationships, with roots. Then you move into a nursing home, and the room is clean, neutral, polite, but empty of your past. The walls don't recognize you. The air carries no familiar scent. The floor doesn't creak in places you memorized. There is no corner soaked in shared laughter, no doorway that reminds you of who once walked through it. You are surrounded by sameness. Identical rooms, identical beds, identical curtains. You place a few framed photos on the table. You try to recreate pieces of your life in that small space. But photographs are flat. They don't carry sound. They don't carry scent. They don't carry the weight of lived experience embedded in bricks and soil. And slowly, something strange begins to happen. Memories don't arrive as easily. You sit in your chair and try to remember the exact sound of your wife's laughter. It feels slightly distant. You try to picture your children running down the hallway of your old house, but the hallway in your mind becomes blurry. You reach for details that once came effortlessly, and now they require effort. At 89, memory is already fragile, but away from the environment that nourished it, it becomes even more delicate. Our brains are deeply connected to place. A smell can unlock a forgotten year. A sound can bring back a face. Remove those anchors, and the memories float without direction. In the nursing home, the air smells of disinfectant and medicine, not of home-cooked meals or rain-soaked soil. The sounds are televisions and distant footsteps, not the familiar rhythm of your own house settling at night. Without those triggers, memories become quieter. You find yourself repeating the same stories, not because you want to, but because those are the strongest ones left. The newer details fade first. The fine textures of your past begin to blur. And when memories fade, it feels like parts of you are dissolving. Because at 89, you are made mostly of memory. Your strength may be reduced, your speed may be gone, but your identity, your story, that is what remains. And when you struggle to recall it clearly, it feels like losing pieces of yourself. You sit in your nursing home room and try to reconstruct your life in your mind. But without the physical anchors around you, it's harder. The garden isn't there to remind you of your spouse's smile. The kitchen doesn't whisper old conversations. The street corner doesn't echo familiar greetings. It's just a room and silence. Sometimes, late at night, you close your eyes and try to walk through your old house in your imagination. You picture opening the front door, stepping inside, touching the wall, sitting in your old chair. You hold onto those images tightly because you know that if they fade completely, you won't just lose memories. You'll lose proof that you lived fully, and that realization is terrifying. Not in a dramatic way, but in a slow, aching way. Because when your environment no longer reminds you who you were, and your memories begin slipping through your fingers, you don't just feel old. You feel untethered, like a book whose pages are quietly being erased. and you feel it deeply, painfully, in your bones. 7. Dignity becomes fragile. There is a difference between aging and surrendering. When you are 89, you accept certain things. You accept that your steps are slower, that stairs require effort, that your hands tremble slightly when you hold a cup. You accept that walking without support might not be wise anymore. Needing help to walk is humbling but manageable. Needing help with the most personal parts of your life, that is something else entirely. At home, even when your body began to weaken, you found ways to protect your dignity. You closed your bathroom door. You took your time. You adjusted. Even if it took longer, it was your private struggle, your private space. Privacy is invisible when you're young. You don't realize how precious it is until it's gone. In a nursing home, help becomes routine, scheduled, necessary. A staff member knocks gently and enters. They are trained, professional, often kind. They smile. They speak softly. But no amount of kindness erases the fact that you are exposed. Tasks you once performed without thought, bathing, dressing, using the restroom now require assistance. Someone stands nearby. Someone guides you. Someone sees you at your most vulnerable. You try to remain composed. You thank them. You cooperate. You even attempt small jokes to ease the awkwardness. But inside, something shifts. Because you remember a different version of yourself. You remember carrying your child on your shoulders, fixing broken furniture, driving long distances without fatigue, being the one others leaned on when life was heavy. You were the dependable one, the stable one, the strong one. Now you wait for someone to help you button your shirt. And that contrast can feel crushing. The first time someone needs to help you bathe, it feels like a line has been crossed, not physically, but emotionally. You tell yourself, this is just part of aging. You try to normalize it. But dignity is deeply tied to independence and privacy. When those shrink, dignity feels fragile. Imagine being a man who once commanded respect in a workplace, whose handshake was firm and confident, now struggling to stand without assistance. Imagine being a woman who once managed a household with precision and strength, now needing someone half your age to adjust your clothes. The staff may treat you gently. They may genuinely care. But they go home after their shift. For them, it is work. For you, it is your life. You begin to notice subtle changes in how you see yourself. You hesitate before asking for help because each request reminds you of what you can no longer do. You apologize more often than necessary. Sorry for the trouble. Sorry you have to do this. You shrink your voice, not because anyone told you to, but because vulnerability feels loud. At 89, dignity becomes something you guard quietly. You sit straighter in your chair when family visits. You try to appear stronger than you feel. You hide discomfort because you don't want them to see how dependent you've become. You don't want their memory of you to change. But inside, you feel the transition. You go from being someone others depended on to someone who depends on everyone. And that shift is not just physical, it is psychological. It rewrites the story you tell yourself about who you are. Dependence can make you feel smaller, even if no one intends it to. When someone speaks about you in the third person while you're in the room, he needs help with this. She can't manage that anymore. You feel invisible and exposed at the same time. You are present, but you are being discussed like a responsibility. And that stings. The hardest part isn't the assistance itself. It's the awareness, the constant reminder that your body no longer obeys you the way it once did, that your autonomy has limits, that your vulnerability is visible. Dignity doesn't disappear overnight. It thins. Like fragile glass, you become more careful with your pride, more sensitive to tone, more aware of how others look at you. You miss the days when you were the one offering help instead of receiving it. And even though you understand that aging is natural, even though you are grateful someone is there to support you, there is still a quiet ache. Because every human being, no matter their age, longs to feel capable, to feel respected, to feel whole. And when dignity becomes dependent on assistance, when your most private moments require witnesses, you don't just feel old, you feel exposed. And that transition, from strength to vulnerability, from protector to protected, from independent to dependent. It doesn't break you loudly, but you feel it deep in your bones. 8. What I really missed was feeling needed. When people talk about old age, they talk about comfort. A comfortable bed, regular meals, medical supervision, safety. But almost no one talks about purpose. And purpose, even at 89, is oxygen. At home, I was not strong in the way I once was. I could not lift heavy objects. I could not walk long distances without resting. But I was still useful. Every morning, I watered the plants in the courtyard, slowly, carefully. It took me longer than it used to, but those plants depended on me. If I forgot, their leaves drooped. If I cared for them, they stood tall. That small act reminded me that I still had an impact on something living. My grandchildren would sit beside me with their problems, school stress, friendships, dreams. They would ask, "What do you think, Grandpa?" And when I spoke, they listened. My experience mattered. My mistakes became lessons for them. My stories were not just memories, they were guidance. Even greeting neighbors had meaning. The shopkeeper would say, "Good morning," and ask about my health. The children in the street waved. I wasn't just an old man walking slowly, I was part of the rhythm of that neighborhood. My presence was woven into daily life. I belonged. Then I moved into a nursing home, and something subtle changed. Everything was done for me. My bed was made before I could even try. My meals arrived on a tray. My laundry was collected. My medication was organized. If I reached for something, someone gently said, "Don't worry, we'll handle it." At first, it felt like kindness. Then it began to feel like erasure. Because when everything is done for you, there is nothing left for you to do. No one depends on you to water plants. No one asks for your advice in the hallway. No one waits for your daily greeting. You wake up, eat, rest, attend activities, return to your room. You receive care, but you don't contribute. And that difference is enormous. Human beings are not designed only to be cared for. We are designed to give, to build, to protect, to guide. Even at 89, that instinct does not disappear. When you remove a person's responsibilities completely, you may protect their body, but you risk weakening their spirit. In the nursing home, I watched staff rush around helping everyone. They were busy, efficient, professional, but they didn't need me. The system functioned perfectly without my involvement. Days began blending together. When no one needs you, time feels heavier. At home, I had reasons to wake up. The plants needed water. The newspaper needed to be read and discussed. The neighbor expected a wave. My family expected my presence at the dinner table. In the nursing home, the day unfolds whether I participate actively or not. You start asking yourself quietly, what difference does my presence make here? That question is dangerous because purpose is tied to identity. When you feel needed, you feel alive. When you feel unnecessary, you begin to shrink inward. I remember one afternoon watching birds through the window. I thought about how even those birds had roles, building nests, feeding their young, gathering food. Nature itself is built on contribution. And there I was, sitting in a perfectly clean room with nothing expected of me. Comfort without purpose becomes emptiness. Safety without usefulness becomes stillness. Even small responsibilities would have made a difference. Folding napkins, helping another resident with conversation, sharing structured stories with younger volunteers. But most systems focus on efficiency, not empowerment. And so you sit and receive. And over time, receiving without giving begins to feel heavy. You begin to miss the weight of responsibility. You miss someone knocking on your door asking, "Can you help me with this?" You miss being the answer instead of the question. Because at 89, you don't fear discomfort as much as you fear irrelevance. You don't just want to be alive. You want to matter. When that feeling fades, something inside you dims. Not dramatically, not visibly, but quietly. And that quiet fading is more painful than any physical ache. What I truly missed was not my house, not even my routine. It was the feeling that my existence added something to the world around me, that someone, somewhere, needed me. And when that disappears, you don't just feel old, you feel unnecessary. And that is a loneliness deeper than silence. It settles inside you, heavy, unspoken, but undeniable. And you feel it in your bones. As we conclude, if you're watching this as a son or daughter, understand this. Your parents don't just need safety. They need familiarity. They need dignity. They need purpose. They need you. And if you're elderly and facing this decision, ask the hard questions. Explore every option. Because once you leave your home, returning is rarely simple. I'm Sexandokus. And if I could go back, I would fight harder to stay where my life actually lived. If this message touched you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because these truths deserve to be spoken before regret becomes permanent. Sometimes the safest place is not the place that feels like home.